Good morning, everyone. My name is Karupit. I am an executive director at HarborCOV. We work with survivors of domestic violence and their children in our community. First and foremost, I want to acknowledge everyone who are here today. It's really sad that I have to get. And thank you everyone for coming up. I'm standing here with Daniel Inc., the City of Chelsea, the City of Chelsea Police Department, MTA Haven Program, Gonza Club, and the Suffolk County DA to invite you to a vigil in memory of Paula Andrea Ortiz Ramirez. And I also want to acknowledge that her sister is here. Her sister Melina is here, and her friend is also here. First and foremost, I had to go out to Paula Andrea Ortiz Ramirez, her children and her family. The story of Paula is one of domestic violence does not discriminate based on race, socioeconomic status, or sexual orientation. Domestic violence is not a family member. It's not a family matter. It is a whole community matter. We must realize this type of violence affects all of us, including the person who causes harm. We need to take a stand to educate and support our friends, neighbor, family, and everyone has a role in this. When we talk about domestic violence, that does not discriminate based on age, race, zip code, or gender. It is important to be clear that domestic violence doesn't impact each of this group the same way. For instance, it is true that men experience domestic violence and domestic violence homicide, and almost yet nearly of all victims of domestic violence homicide are women who are killed by men. And the men are almost always killed by other men because they are somehow associated with the domestic violence victim. It is important to note that in nearly all cases of domestic violence homicide, the abuse never starts out as physical. It's always also important to know that the presence of a gun in a domestic violence situation increases the risk of domestic violence homicide by 500%. And it is also important to note that the dangerous time for victims of domestic violence is when they attempt to leave the relationship. So I'm asking the community and everyone who is here to believe survivor. It's never the survivor's fault in a domestic violence situation. And please reach out for help. HarborCOV provides a free services, support, and it's confidential. And also call the statewide hotline if you have friends and family who are experiencing domestic violence. Thank you everyone for being here. I also want to acknowledge that the District Attorney, Rachel Rollin is here. Thank you so very much for you to be here. We know how busy you are. And we also know that you care about this community so much. Thank you. And for that, I would like to invite our City Manager, Tom Ambrosino, to come to the stand, please, Tom.
Thank you, Karu. I wish I had some words of comfort that I could offer folks that are gathered here, but I don't. I think for those that have been in public life a long time, like us, this is just one too many of these vigils that we've had to attend. Of course, we mourn the tragic loss of life of Miss Ortiz Ramirez, and our prayers are with her surviving family, her sister, her children. But I think for us, there's such a palpable and painful sense of helplessness today. Another loss of life that we feel like should have been prevented, but was not. You know, I just think that as a community of compassion, and Chelsea is a community of compassion, that we just have to figure out a better way to intervene. That perhaps through more outreach and education, we can reach out to women or anyone in these volatile situations and empower them to be able to reach out for help before it's too late. I guess the only thing I can offer as a city official is a commitment, my commitment, the commitment of my city staff, to HarborCOV and other stakeholders like that who are in this business, that we will do everything possible to improve upon that outreach, that communication, that engagement, in the hope, I guess in the fervent hope, that this is the last of these kind of vigils that we will have to attend together. So with that, I want to call up someone who I know is dedicated to trying to end these situations, our current Suffolk County District Attorney and soon to be U.S. Attorney, Rachel Ross.
Thank you, everyone, for coming here today to take a stand against domestic violence. I want to especially thank the community partners here today who work tirelessly to serve victims and ultimately to end domestic violence. That's HarborCOV specifically, and the work you do for the people of Chelsea and surrounding communities, as well as Jane Doe for the work you do supporting these crucial efforts. And of course, the city manager and the chief of police, Chief Kais, works on these issues every day. No one should ever be in fear of a partner or a family member. But tragically, we're here because of Paula Andrea Ortiz, who lost her life in what we allege was a lethal act of domestic violence. And I call her Paula Andrea Ortiz because often adding insult to injury when women are murdered by overwhelmingly their significant others and partners, we then honor that person by using that individual's last name. We will not do that today. She's Paula Andrea Ortiz. She came here from Colombia and made Chelsea her home. She made a life for herself here and raised 2 children. My team and I are available to support Paula's children, her loved one, and everyone else that was harmed by this tragic loss. We are also here to help survivors of domestic violence at every stage of their journey. Services and resources are available to help victims plan for their and their family's safety, to take the first steps forward and to rebuild their life free from their abusers. If you or someone you know is at risk of violence in the home or in a relationship, there is always help available. Domestic violence is a terrible betrayal and never accepted. You usually see me at murder scenes and these individuals don't know each other. Domestic violence involves somebody who claims that they love you or alleges they love you and then commits the most violent, heinous acts. Victims of violence by a partner or family member can have complex emotions and concerns about leaving their abuser. They can have children in common or be financially dependent on the individual. They can have feelings of shame or embarrassment or believe that their partner will change. They can be isolated from friends and loved ones. Cultural expectations or religious beliefs can also make it more difficult to leave a spouse. All of those things are true. and we will still be here to help. No matter the circumstances and unique considerations victims may face, it is important that they know that they are not alone. You are never alone. We're here to help you and to support you. And that does not always necessarily mean prosecution. If we can help get you shelter or housing, treatment, and services, we will do that. Don't be fearful to come to Chief Kai's or the Suffolk County DA's office because you're afraid of deportation or criminal implications with respect to this individual. Let us start the process of getting you the help that you need. Domestic violence often, but not always, is gender-based. It is frequently a husband to a wife or a boyfriend to a girlfriend, but we must start talking inclusively about this epidemic. There is domestic violence in the LGBTQIA+ community. It crosses socioeconomic boundaries. People forget Charles Stewart murdered Carol and Christopher DeMady. That was a double domestic violence homicide. That is lost in the tragedy of those two lives that were stolen. Many of you saw me 2 years ago, almost to the day, on Christmas Day in 2019, standing in front of a garage in Roxbury after Erin Pascal, a 40-year-old mother, threw her daughter Allison, 4 years old, and her son Andrew, 1 year old, off of a garage in a double murder-suicide. That is an act of domestic violence. We need to change our minds on what we believe this looks like. It is rampant, and it is happening everywhere. And we are here today to say loud and clear that in Suffolk County, it has no place. And as your DA, for however long that is, and I can assure you the individual that follows, and Chief Kai's, we pledge that we will help in any way that we can. We want you safe and alive, and we will deal with potential prosecution later. We want you safe. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I want to take a minute to thank HarborCOV, City Mayor, State Attorney Rollins, Chelsea's Chief of Police, and the City of Chelsea for coming together and honoring Paula Andrea Ramirez and her family. My name is Diana Mancera, and I am the Director of Membership and Programs at JDI. JDI is the only Massachusetts state coalition in the state that provides sexual assault and domestic violence programs support. We are made up 60 member programs across the state. Our job is to do policy work on the state level and federal level to support programs like HarborCOV and all of our allies doing the work in the field, and to engage partners from all sectors and communities to help create an equitable and safer community for all. We know that we cannot do this work alone, and we fueled by strength, hope, and resilience of survivors, and the leadership of communities like Chelsea. I am not only here representing JDI, I am here as an advocate of the Chelsea community. I am here as a community member. I was not born and raised in Chelsea, but I've lived in Chelsea. Chelsea is one of many places I call home, my place of safety and my place of family and friends. Did you know that every 9 seconds in the US, a woman is assaulted or beaten? Every 9 seconds. In the US, nearly half of all female homicide victims are killed by a current or former partner. Black women in the United States are twice as likely as white women to fatally be shot by an intimate partner. Twice as likely. Hispanic women in the US who experience violence by their intimate partner are more likely to be killed than women of other races. This year in Massachusetts, we have lost 14 people from domestic violence homicide. 14 people. When would one more be too many? Why do I share these numbers? Why do I think these numbers are important? Because the reality is that domestic violence doesn't impact everyone the same. And yet, domestic violence is still preventable. People who have full access to community-based programs like domestic violence programs, housing, medical and legal advocacy organizations, they can provide immediate safety planning and ultimately prevent domestic violence homicide. As a community, we have the power to prevent domestic violence. As a community, we can say no one more. I know for some of us, it may feel really weird, or you may be worried about calling the police because you may not want to make things worse. You may fear retaliation. You may believe that this is not your business. Why me? But when I hear that someone in my community has experienced violence, that someone in my community has been killed due to domestic violence, when I hear that 2 children have witnessed their mother being killed, I make it my business. It is my business. It is your business. Beyond this vigil, I encourage each of us to be upstanders, not bystanders. Speak up. Ideally, before it gets to a point when it's too late. The next time you catch up your neighbor in the hallway or in the laundromat or at church, gently let them know you are concerned and pass along information about domestic violence resources in your area. And if you do not have those resources at hand, listen to them, validate them, and offer help and support. Do not blame them. Do not judge them or pressure them. Do not give them advice. Instead, gently suggest options. It is totally okay for you to tell someone, I am worried for your safety. Please forgive me for intruding into your life, but I am hearing what is happening in the wall, and I am concerned for your safety, and I'm in the safety of your kids. You can also call your local resources and ask for guidance about how to best approach specific situations, because every case is different. You can also call the state hotline, 1-800-799-7233. Religious leaders play a big role. You do not have to be an expert on domestic violence, but you can listen and believe the victim. You can help them assess their danger, and you can refer them to a local program like HarborCOV. As a community, we can advocate for better education and prevention in our children's school and our workplaces. Institutional messages about these issues and intersections can shift attitudes and behaviors in our community. For people who use risk of using abuse and control in their intimate partners, there is help. Rather than harming your partner, you can call a hotline 10-10 helpline. The phone number is 877-898-3411. Again, this is an issue that all of us can stop. All of us are part of the solution. And please say with me, no one more. No one more. No one more. No one more. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Brian Keyes, Police Chief of the Chelsea Police Department. On behalf of the men and women of the Chelsea Police Department, we would like to extend our deepest condolences and heartfelt sympathy to the family of Paula Ortiz, specifically the beloved children, Thomas and Maria. I know Melinda is here, and our hearts go out to you. We are so sorry that you have to grieve the loss of your mom. and your sister. This tragedy never ever should have happened. The theme of this vigil this morning is to offer a venue for healing, to mourn the loss of Paula, as well as to raise awareness, to continue the incredibly important conversation as it pertains to ending domestic violence and abuse. It really, truly takes a village. There needs to be an ongoing effort on all of our parts to not only support survivors, but to also to try to do everything we possibly can so that people do not find themselves trapped in these dangerous situations in the first place. Often women are constrained by economic and emotional abuse, as well as physical violence and isolation from friends and family. Leaving cannot only be hard, but can also be very, very dangerous. Letting victims know that they are to be believed and not alone is a crucial first step towards stopping domestic violence once and for all. As a community, we need to find innovative and creative ways to intervene to create effective safe havens and a viable way out for those individuals that find themselves imprisoned by this recurring, seemingly never-ending cycle of violence. We also need to pursue effective prosecutorial strategies where we do not over-police, but where we utilize every reasonable tool at our disposal to identify, locate, arrest, and prosecute those that continue to prey on innocent victims in the family unit. As we remember Paula here this morning, we must rededicate ourselves to our shared goal of building a resilient community where the continuation of domestic violence is never tolerated, ever. Please know that DA Rollins, myself, City Manager, City Council members, HarborCOV, the Chelsea Collaborative, and countless others will continue that important conversation. As we move forward in the coming weeks, for now I think it is important that we honor the memory of Paula, now that she is in a better place at peace. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. Before I say anything else, I want to express my gratitude for all of you attending at what is not only a very busy time of the year, but also a time where many of us have deep personal inner struggles that would make it difficult to acknowledge others. The homicide victims we acknowledge today deserve so much more, but this moment of time is the least we can do, and I appreciate every single one of you for being here. My name is Charles Hornstein, and I am the Database and Program Evaluation Director for HarborCOV. One of the most common questions I've received over the course of the pandemic is the question of whether cases have gone up or down during this unprecedented time. And I can tell you from HarborCOV's client base alone, we've noticed a 17% increase in domestic violence reported by our clients. And every service we provide to those clients has had at least a 32% increase in need to provide the survivor just what they need to get by. But sometimes, even just the ability to call for help, such as using HarborCOV's hotline or other DV resources in the area, has become more difficult over the course of the pandemic. For example, often the moment someone decides to reach out for help is when a family member or friend notices something or a behavior that is not okay and tells the survivor. This is something that is much more difficult to happen organically during these times of isolation. Furthermore, those who know something is wrong, the fear of retaliation, will have more hesitation to call for help when the person who is abusing them is constantly within earshot due to working from home or other pandemic-related job hardships. And of course, even before the pandemic, many survivors would hesitate to report abuse or seek help if they feared the financial and logistical implications of leaving their abuser, which has only been further exacerbated due to the challenges the pandemic has brought on all of us. Regardless of these COVID times, I hear survivors of abuse in both my professional and personal life blame themselves. They think that perhaps they caused the person to react this way, or that because they weren't perfect either, that maybe they deserve some of this, or that maybe they think they could have said something sooner before it got to this point. Sometimes someone will hesitate to reach out for help if they think that confiding this abuse will make them seem weak or less capable or otherwise at fault for letting it happen. But the more we shame others and perpetuate this idea that someone needs to deserve help or that they caused their abuse, the more we will see people hesitate to seek help when they need it. For all these reasons and more, the numbers I could give to my funders, my fellow colleagues, my stakeholders, anyone else rarely tell the whole story. We only report on the domestic violence that we know. Another question I'm often asked is, so what does the data say about domestic violence, and what can we do to stop this? Even before pandemic time, I always wanted to urge people to look for ways for systematic equality and equity. When we empower our women and our people of color, our LGBTQIA, and all those financially struggling, we empower everybody, and we make it so much easier for those who are experiencing abuse to have options. But more than anything else right now, what I really want to urge the community is we need to normalize the ability to confide in each other. When someone comes to you for a moment of vulnerability, saying something didn't feel right, don't punish them by implying weakness or blame. And when others come to you about harm that you've caused, I urge you to not be defensive or blame them. Really listen. Try to have an open mind. It's very easy to tell someone that a problem they have with you is somehow either their fault or not yours. But in cases like this, it is rarely helpful. And in cases of domestic violence, these conversations that are seemingly innocuous will feed into the mindset that someone has when they decide that something more serious warrants attention. The conversations we have with our peers and our family will shape the attitudes of whether someone feels like they deserve better in times of more serious struggle. Remember that no abuser starts as someone who threatens, hits, or kills others. It's a slow progression of unchecked entitlement and a slow overvaluing of one's own emotions and needs over others that festers the need for control at any cost. To combat that, we need to combat the idea that people have to deserve goodness to receive it, or that something has to be a certain level of bad to warrant attention. We need to combat the idea that someone is too sensitive. Only then can we normalize the ability to call for help in times of harm and the behaviors that would never lead to harm in the first place. Thank you. Before we conclude today's event, we want to take a moment to acknowledge not just Paula Andrea Ortiz Ramirez, but also the other victims of domestic homicide in Massachusetts for the year 2021. For those who would like to participate in the candlelight vigil, HarborCOV invites you to stand behind us at the podium to symbolize how we are all in this together. I invite anyone who wishes and feels comfortable to come behind us. For those who have not gotten candles, there are still some over there. And for those who have would like a list of the homicide victims, there's also one over there. I do apologize for the slightly outdated list because there was unfortunately one more homicide victim this weekend as well. Today we remember and pay respect to the domestic homicide victims in Massachusetts for the year 2021. And out of respect for those we've lost, I will read their names out loud. Apologies for any mispronunciation. Kristen A. Carey, Michael Ritchie, Danielle Taylor, Saharbanu Rindani, Rhonda Catalina, Celeste Marte Lebron, Zahara de Elka, Fatima Yassin, Jamie Dickinson, Alicia Haywood, Diane Silviera, Deha Jenkins Manus, Paula Andrea Ortiz Ramirez, and just this weekend, Shirley Owen. Remember the words of Jude Gibbs, who said, "Grief does not demand pity, it requests acknowledgement." And now I ask everyone to join me in 1 minute of silence. to acknowledge those victims. Once again, HarborCOV thanks everyone for being here and for taking this time in a very busy time to acknowledge and remember those that we've lost.